Hello, Attactioneers. We are here today with a really extra special, fresh off the world circuit, Dromai Isaac Jessen special deck. And I'm, of course, joined by Isaac. Isaac, what's up, dude?
Thanks for being here with me, Colin. I'm very excited to talk about this deck. I really love Dromai the Hero, playing this deck, and I kind of committed to it before knowing if it would be a good meta call or not for Worlds. I was just very excited and all in.
Totally. Yeah, you didn't even care if it was the right meta deck. You were just in it. So I'm also very excited. I have been dabbling in Dromai and I have struggled greatly, which I know you also struggled in the beginning, but you really found a good spot for yourself. So I'm excited to go through the deck. Just a little background: you went 4-1 at Worlds in the CC portion, which is pretty sweet. So the deck is viable. We also saw Fuad from Italy in the top 8 playing Dromai. So it's a real thing. Dragons are cool and Dromai is dope. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about the matchups you had at Worlds?
Yeah, sure. And I would also say Fuad's deck is, I guess, not quite a bit different than mine, but definitely has some significant differences. And he also did really well. I think he went 5-0 on Dromai. So be sure to check that out as well for some alternate ideas. But after, pretty extensive testing, I found the deck that I liked or that works with my play style. So on day one, I went 2-1 in draft and then went into the CC portion, in which, like you said, I went 4-1. I played against two Fis, two Icelanders, and a Dash, which is, probably about as well as I could hope for. I did take a loss to one of the Fis round four, um, but I like almost every matchup with this deck except for Fi and also Viscerai. So in a Fi dominated meta, facing 2 out of 5 Fis, I feel like is pretty fortunate or just like, middle of the road luck, which I'm just fine with. And that was great.
Nice. Yeah, the Fi matchup is painful, especially when you're just getting started and when everyone's playing Fi, it feels pretty insurmountable. So getting that one win against the Fi is super dope, and really excited to jump in. But first, maybe like give us like a little history on your experience with Dromai. I know when um, Uprising came out, there was no real support for uh, Kano or Lexi or Azalea, which are or Brute. They're your kind of other mainstays as heroes and classes. So Dromai seemed like an interesting choice for you from the available options. So won't you give us that a little bit of that background?
Sure, yeah. I kind of liked the flavor of Dromai, and then when all the cards were spoiled, I was pretty much all in because I really like decks with engines. I really liked playing Levia. Uh, Decks with engines can sometimes be a bit more difficult, which is, a nice challenge while you're playing. Dromai doesn't have a very proactive game plan. Like every matchup is quite different. So you have to be adaptable, make decisions on the fly, know your like specific win con for that matchup, and coupled with having this little engine you're running, and the flexibility of the deck, like all those things just really appealed to me. So once I got a taste for it, I was really, really into it. I did kind of I started off playing only 1 and 0 cost dragons in a very red line deck, which kind of has its place, but pretty much just auto loses to like Iyslander or Viscerai or you some matchups, a Necria or a Vincerakai or Optimi are kind of your part of your win cons. So not having access to many blues hampers you in those regards.
Totally. Yeah, I could see that. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to jump into this deck. Maybe just in case anyone's new, haven't played Dromai yet. She is the Draconic Illusionist hero, and her ability says whenever you pitch a red card, create an ash token. And an ash token is a material that you use to transform into your dragons. And then the other half of her hero ability is says if you've played a red card this turn, dragons you control have go again while attacking. Um, and of
Yep.
course, if it dies before the chain link resolution, you don't gain go again. So that's probably one of the trickier um, moments in Dromai is all those layers of attacking and when things resolve and dragons disappearing for various reasons. But yeah, so let's jump in. What are kind of like your high level, uh, you know, things to consider when playing Dromai, or I guess Dromai, or mostly this deck? I'm not sure if there's like a big deviation in those two things, but
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody's like Dromai is not yet solved. Um, and like I said, because it varies how much how you need to play the deck in different matchups, it's like kind of difficult to solve this hero. But there are like a few baseline things to keep in mind when piloting Dromai. The first one is like understanding your ash generation. In some matchups, it's very difficult to generate ash without just losing the game. In some matchups, you need to hit your second cycle with excess ash on the table. Some matchups you run sand cover, so you kind of always need to have an ash online um, to make use of that. Otherwise, it's a dead card. Um, some matchups playing out Necria or a more expensive ash negative dragon. That includes the zero cost dragons that don't pitch a red to play them, thus replacing the ash. When you play them, you burn one of your ash. So in that case, you need to know how many ash you need to leave floating, and that kind of comes up um, like when you play cards like Rake the Embers or when Dust Up hits. Um, if you pitch to Furnace, different things like this they'll present decision points to you where you have to decide whether you kind of like get a bit greedy and burn all your ash or leave some on the table for next turn. And sometimes it's not that easy. Like in the moment, you're like, well, this is what I should do, but I'm like kind of getting steamrolled here, and I really just play all my dragons, you
yeah.
know. So as I mentioned before, also uh, you kind of pilot every matchup differently. So just having a sideboard plan alone isn't really very helpful. Um, Unlike some decks that are very proactive, I would only recommend taking this to an event if you have reps on it. Uh, Another thing I would keep in mind is like rarely does your victory hinge on certain key cards, right? Like we're not relying entirely on Channel Mount Heroic or something like that, or Frost Hex or whatever it may be. There are some matchups like against Guardian where you don't want to lose all your Burn Them Alls or Chrome Eyes or Mirage Guys. But losing a couple of those or playing them earlier is not really the end of the world if you do have to block. So because you're so flexible and your deck has such a dense power level, like understanding it's not, you know, if you have to block with Optimi and in this matchup it, isn't one of your win conditions or whatever, it like doesn't matter, or Tomultai sometimes I'll just block with it. Who cares? It's expensive. It's not part of my win con here. Doesn't matter at all. So I think understanding that and not like agonizing over like keeping all of your cards is very important because you do quite a lot of blocking in this deck. Uh, I would also warn that so my kind of tendency is to just like hedge my bets or kind of build a more resilient deck. Like this deck has good game into Dorinthia, Rhinar, I Viscerai. I kind of like built this deck to, do the best I can into a lot of decks. But if you're trying to just spike an event, like I didn't see any Dorinthias or any, whatever, right? So there are some changes you could make just to get better into your good matchups, because I definitely did not have enough sideboard room for all of the sideboard cards I would like. And lastly, if you are going to make changes to this deck, I would recommend keeping a few things in mind. Like there's a number of ratios. First of which is your number of blue cards. And that directly correlates to the number of like expensive cards you want to play out. There's 2 plays you can make with blue cards, or maybe 3. You can pitch a blue to play another blue, like an Ember Moss Centipede, and then you're just swinging for 6. That's fairly productive. Not really what you want to be doing, but if you don't have to block that much and it's a good exchange, like blues work off of each other like that. The main function of blues is playing out Vincerakai, Necria, another blue, or if you run them, CNCs or Phantasmaclasms or something like that. So you can't get greedy and cut blues while leaving a lot of high cost cards in your hand, because you only really have room for one high cost card at a time to then stick in arsenal, and then you're going to want to draw blue soon to play it out, and then, stick another expensive card in arsenal and hope to see another blue. So that's a very fragile balance, because the rest of the time you only want red, block for 3s. And the second ratio is the number of starters. I call them starters. It's like basically red cards with Go Again. Sigil of Solace also counts here, but they're cards that will enable Go Again for your dragons, and also very pertinently enable Furnace. Well, I can talk about that in a minute when we get to Furnace, but like a high ratio of starters is very important. Also, a decent ratio of non-dragon starters is kind of important, but kind of important at the beginning of the game as well. I find free starters are specifically good because you can block and play 1 out and then have your dragons online for that turn, and it's pretty good value. There's always a risk of drawing an all dragon hand at the start of the game, but that risk is like pretty well mitigated by this deck.
Nice.
So those are my tips to keep in mind. Thanks for tuning in.
That's it. Dromai. Just build the deck right and then play it good. I did have a question.
Yep.
You said that the power level of the deck is dense. I was just curious what you meant by that.
Oh, just because red cards are also your resource cards, right? It's not like maybe Briar or Viscera. Well, Viscerai's blues are quite good, but a lot of decks you have to have X amount of like resource cards, right? Or non-attack actions or whatever. And you kind of have to fill these ratios, which you do in Dromai. There's a number of cards I don't really like because of the limited card pool. But for the most part, it's like, a dragon, it blocks, it plays, and it pitches, which in other decks is abnormal, right? Like even in Dromai, it pitches under rate. Like if you're just pitching a red to play out, like a Miragai or something, that on in of itself is not really that great of a 2-card hand. It's like a 2-card hand for like net 6 points of damage / health either way, so saying your red cards are resource cards also is like definitely true, but not always that great. But your second second cycle is just like straight fire, and you have many more power cards in the deck because you are relying on reds for your resources. It's just great.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way, but because you are incentivized to pitch red cards to create ash, it really does, one, set up that second cycle, but also, as you say, like it changes the way in which you craft your hands and play things out. So I think that's a part of the reason I've struggled with Dromai. I think there's a lot of nuance to that. And one of the things I think is the most nuanced pieces of equipment is Flamescale Furnace, which might be a good kind of pivot into looking at the deck and starting out with like your main equipment choices. So
let's get into it.
Jump into that.
So for anybody watching, this probably will be a bit of a long deck tech. We're going to talk about the card choices and then like some matchups and then some potential changes at the end here. So if you're interested in the lines and the cards, great. If you want to skip around, great. But just saying, you can't just pick up and play this deck anyway. So buckle up.
Buckle up. Let's go. All right. Well, obviously, Storm of Sandakai is your only choice for weapon. So, for any noobs out there, it is a weapon that basically lets your dragons attack for 0 cost. So it's pretty sweet if you're running dragons, which is what most people do, unless you're me and you try to run Talishar Dromai, and that's a bad idea. So don't do it. So we'll move right past that into the meteor choices here. Crown of Providence seems just like a good choice for everybody these days. Any specific things you are using it for, or kind of situations that it really comes in clutch?
It's just a really good card. I mean, you could run Arcanite Skullcap if you don't have Crown. There's really no reason that you can't, right? So you don't have to spend $150 or whatever. It's just this card's like slightly better. In some, it gives you, because you only have armor in one other piece of equipment, so it gives you that extra armor you need. Like against Fi, it'll buy you enough, like it'll block a mass trigger or some sort of trigger to then have a hand. Same thing against Guardian. If you like can't get crushed here, it's like a get out of jail free card just for the armor you have with this character. And then the other thing you can use it for, it's important to not get too greedy. Like, don't just throw anything in your arsenal turn 0 and then be like, well, Crown will bail me out. Because I've been there.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
As soon as you use it, then you don't get to do that anymore. So it can make it a bit unfortunate. But they're in really fast matchups, being able to arsenal anything and then cycle that out for a 5-card hand, whether you need it to block or tempo or whatever, is very powerful. And in a lot of matchups, you can get a bit greedy because of this card, right? Like if I want to play out Tomotai in this matchup, I can arsenal Tomotai and hope that I draw blue pretty soon, right? But then if I get in a really tight spot and I'm just like, I'm totally screwed, I can block and just send Tomotai away and like draw a card. So, normally before this card existed, you get hard punished for arsenaling the wrong card. And now you just get one get out of jail free card free card in that department. So, I mean, that effect is just like astoundingly powerful.
Totally. Nice. I'll skip over Furnace because I think that's going to be a longer talk. So let's pop down to the Mage Master boots.
Sure. So this card was not originally in my list when Dromai first came out, but now I have it streamlined down to you're either running Mage Masters to play out Passing Mirage into most likely Ghostly Touch or like a Pitch Stacked Optimi or something, or you're using Mage Masters to play out a Toma Findal for a little bit of health gain and tempo in the faster matchups like against Fi. So because you can use it in both of those instances, it's just like streamlined to have it in the deck at all times and then just like have one of those plays available.
Nice. Yeah, I really like the passing Mirage into a big dragon attack is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. And then Silken Form, also very important. I love that these two like common equipments are just like very good in this deck.
Yeah, Silken Form is it's quite good for a common equipment. It's like a bit underwhelming compared to like if you had a legendary arm piece or something. But it does come up pretty often. Like you can pitch a red to quell, make an Ashwing, then you have Arcane Barrier. You also have an Ashwing that needs to get killed or will continue to deal damage. You can quell pitching a blue to get good value out of that for the turn. It's like pseudo AB.
Mm-hmm.
And then hopefully you can make an Ashwing with it. It also has like, I really, really like Quell as a mechanic because it's like the last word. The way the game works with layers, Quell kind of cheats that system. And so, if your opponent plays like say they pop Breaking Scales, or they play like an Art of War to get something to hit, or, they play a red Aether Ice Vein and you can sand cover, then quell it. Or I guess you have AB in that instance, but there's just like a number of instances where, or even I've like, if Dory goes one over the top, I've then quelled to prevent it from hitting. There's like, it's actually pretty powerful to have that just in your back pocket, even though it's 1 damage, you're like blocking 1 hit effect. In faster matchups, you can also like, instead of blocking Snatch for 4 or blocking with 2 cards, you can like block with a card and then quell, and then at least you get Nash out of it. Instead of burning your 2 cards. So very versatile, very good. I mean, I'll replace it once we get something better, but definitely very useful.
How often would you say you're using the instant ability versus the quell ability, or does it just depend on the matchup and situation?
I use the instant ability less than you might think. I would love to use it every time, but if something comes up where you're like pitching a blue to quell and you're very ash poor, then you don't want to make an Ashwing, burn your last ash, and then not be able to play on your turn. So that's like a pretty bad feeling, but probably doesn't come up most of the time, but definitely comes up more than you'd like.
Because you can do both. You can quell and then use its instant ability.
Yeah, you just use it at the end of their turn.
Nice.
To make an Ashwing. In which they could respond to that, but
Totally. Awesome. All right, so let's get into it. Flamescale Furnace. It's a beefy card. I'm amazed at how much skill I think it takes to play this card effectively. It hurts my brain a little bit. I want to be better at using it, but it seems pretty hard. So give us the lowdown on Flamescale Furnace, how it helps you in the different situations, and what it's like best used for.
Yeah, so I mean, without Flamescale Furnace, your deck would be pretty resource poor, or maybe ash poor. It's like the key component you need to like balance out this high red card requirement. And so there's there's a lot of uses for it that you'll like learn as you play with it. But one use is early in the game. If you don't have any ash, you can play a Ravenous Rabble or a Sigil of Solace or something like that. Or a Burn Them All. I've even played Burn Them All, pitched to Furnace, and then like played a dragon, then Burn Them All dies. But it still like allows you to get that first ash, which can be like pretty powerful. You can also do something like that mid game, but it's an enabler that way. Specifically in the Iyslander matchup, or I guess like Kano as well, because it's an instant. If you've like pitched a red to block some, if you've like played a red, like played a sand cover or an Oasis Respite or something like that, then you can pitch to Furnace in response to what they do and gain 2 resources to then use, to block whatever they're doing. Or on your turn, if Iyslander tries to tax you, or like Oldhim tries to blizzard you or something, you can pitch to Flamescale in response to that to then gain 2 resources to like try to pay through some of those taxes. So it's very good reacting in that circumstance. There is the common play pattern where you like pitch to play a Dune Breaker and then pitch to Furnace and then play CNC, right? Because it like cheats 1 resource. I'm listing a lot of cards I don't run actually, but it's just the instances in which this card's used. There's also an instant, this kind of does come up often, like if you play a defense reaction and then your opponent chooses to like play out an energy potion or arsenal or something and kind of surprise you have like extra cards. because you played a defense reaction, you played a red card that turn, and then you can pitch to Furnace, gain an Ash if you're just going to have extra cards on your turn. So that's a pretty, like, I don't know, utile way to use it as well.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's the part that I find hard is those like little moments where you're like finding just small efficiencies that can either generate you ash, just make sure you're coming in for more than one attack because you remember that, you know, Flamescale Furnace gives you that extra resource and things like that. And I think it's weird to think about, and I think, you know, just requires a bit of practice for me specifically. But
it's just a new mechanic.
Yeah.
So it's not intuitive when you pick it up, but
totally.
It is pretty easy to get used to after you play with it for a while.
Nice.
Just becomes part of it. Yep.
All right. Well, that is the main equipment board. So let's dive into the main deck. Jump out here, get the full view. So a lot of dragons, and then a couple of those starters that you talked about, and some other key cards that look pretty interesting in here. So walk me through this. Where do you want to start? And I'll follow along and show the.
We can just start at the top.
Let's go.
With the starters up there.
Right in.
Nice. Get in there. There you go. So Sweeping Blow is great because you can just pitch a blue, play it, and then have floating resources and play something else, and you still get an ash. You can pitch a red early to get 2 ash. It doesn't have Phantasm. So just a great card. Yeah. Ravenous Rabble went back in the deck. I had it out for a really long time, and sometimes I run 11 blues main board. Sometimes you hit a blue off the top, and I mostly don't like it because it blocks for 2. And it also is kind of like not doing what you want to be doing in a lot of games, right? Like if your win condition is like playing out dragons or getting ahead that way, Ravenous Rabble is not doing that, right? Like it threatens 4, which is great, but that's not how you win. So I had my reservations, but now that it's back in, I do really like it in. I prefer it over Dunebreaker Cenopai just because, well, it doesn't have Phantasm, but also it can be a 1-card hand instead of like Dunebreaker on a 2-card hand is just 2 cards for 5, which actually isn't that great. So anyway, we went with Ravenous. I have a bit too many block for 2s in the deck. I used to have less. So now my deck size shrinks against opponents like Dory or Katsu, but because they're not the meta, I'm living with it.
Nice. Awesome.
And I left the Burn Them Alls in the main board. In some games, they're not as important, but it's just a block for 3 resource card that's also a starter. It can suck if you like play a Tome of Findal and then draw like a defense reaction and a Burn Them All, you know, or whatever. But I don't know. There's just the upside kind of outweighed the downside, I think. So it stays in the main board.
Nice. Yeah, I'll have some questions about this when we get into the matchups because I think this card's super cool. But in my own practicing, I'm a bit unsure of like when it shines, you know. Other than like, you know, like Guardian, like the longer, grindier games. But anyways, moving on.
Well, what I would say with Burn Them All is when you're going to let me just cut off that moving on. We're not moving on.
One more thing with that.
Just while we're thinking about it. What I would say with Burn Them All is like just do the math of how much damage it's likely to do in the game, right? So if you're playing against or, you know, Briar, like a hyper aggro deck, and odds are you're going to have like 2 or 3 turns left, right? Then playing it out is like maybe not worth, you know, maybe it's better to block with it. And so just try to think about how much value you are likely to get out of it before the game is over. A lot of players don't run Arcane Barrier against you. And even if they do, in order to block it, it takes a whole separate card out of their hand. So it does have like some hidden value that way. But yeah.
Nice. Yeah. When you were talking earlier, I definitely remember having like an opening hand where it was like all dragons and burn them all. And I was like, okay, I can play burn them all and then just pitch my dragons to like flame scale and just, move on with my life.
Yeah.
But it's really funny when that situation happens.
Just Dromai things.
Dromai things. They've all got them. All right. So next row, we got some blues up in here.
Yep, these are the main board blues. Sweeping Blow is great. It, makes 2 ash if you pitch a red towards it, blocks for 3. It's a blue. I like Enigma Chimera and Embermoth Centipie. I used to have blue Billowing Mirage instead of the Pursuits, actually, but that card definitely underperformed. I like these big blues because if you draw one early, you can just pitch 2 reds to play it. You're threatening 6 and you make 2 ash, right? Like turn 1. So it kind of ups that. And in certain matchups like Fi or, Katsu or Dori or, whatever, I guess sometimes your win condition is like chipping your opponent down, not flooding them with dragons. So, and sometimes having dragons out can actually be a liability because of hit effects. So having like a certain number of attacks or cards like this that like strip 2 cards out of their hand or they're going to like take 6 actually have a lot of value. Even against Guardian, it like still puts a counter on your Ghostly Touch without burning one of your dragons. It's not really, it strips one of their cards. It's not really the end of the world. Plus blue Billowing can make an Ashwing, which makes it good. Playing the blue does not give your existing dragons go again. So I did cut that card for Pursuits. The Pursuits block for 2 and they cost 2, which is like, I don't really love this card, but it's another card that it presents a hit effect and real damage. I might cut it at some point. If you do play it and they don't have any armor left, feels really good. Otherwise, feels pretty bad. So.
Do you does it become important at all in like the mirror that you could like take out a dragon and the hit effect is applied?
Yeah, definitely.
Nice.
It's very good in the mirror, and there's a number of cards that are very good in the mirror, which I think is important, and I run cards for that. I did not expect to see a lot of Dromais at Worlds or in this meta just because of Fi.
Yep. But I think at people's like local level, there's a lot of like illusionist lovers, so you probably see a more Dromais at your LGS than you would at Worlds. But I think that's really cool. I'm always trying to figure out if I can get Pursuit of Knowledge into a deck, and then you're like, well, I could pummel it, and that's when things go off the rails for me. But it's a great card. Wish it blocked for 3, but that would be busted at that point.
Yeah, I love it. It's like the best. I agree. It's a card I always want to run.
It's beautiful. It's great. All right, so let's get into everyone's favorite thing about Dromai, which is dragons, and you got a bunch in your main deck right here. So I think we got them ordered up by price, basically, except Necri is a little out of order. That's okay. So let's dip into these dragons. All right. So first question, which is your favorite dragon? Because that's the most important question.
Well, it's kept changing as I play with the deck more. It used to be Asvalai, then it was Optimi, and right now my favorite dragon is Necria.
Nice.
I'll get to that when we talk about Necria, but the best dragon.
Nice.
It's awesome.
Hell yeah. All right, let's jump in.
So these free dragons are like your power play dragons. If it's at all a second cycle game, you want to pitch these close together and reach that cycle with excess ash, because the deck is broken when you can just play out 3 dragons in a turn. that's like incredible value. You're going to attack for like 9 and it's going to like save you 9 life for them to kill them all.
Hmm.
So they just get like way above curve if if you're able to play them out, um, multiple in a turn.
Nice.
Aswai's Arcane has a lot of value, being split damage. It's 3 health has a lot of value, actually, like against things like Rosetta, where it's really easy for them to attack 2 or less health dragons, or like Iyslander, who can, we can talk more about this later, but ping your dragons out of the air mid attack. The higher health dragons are also more resilient to that kind of thing. So the 3 health is actually really good on a free dragon.
Nice.
And Chromai might be the best utility dragon in the deck. It's just like if it gets pinged out of the air or if it gets popped, you just gain an action point no matter what. And it allows you to put on a lot of pressure against poppers, essentially, or against decks that are pretty good against you. It being free for 3 damage is also like just fine, even if you don't think it'll get popped. But it just allows you to do things like once you're set up a bit, then if you have like a passing or a Mirage out and you attack with Chromai, then you gain 2 action points. And now you can attack, they have to like pop 2 separate Ash Wings to end your turn. And then maybe you have a burn them all out or something. So you're chipping them that way as well. And like Chromai is oftentimes kind of one of the linchpins of these, bigger power turns and like overwhelming your opponent in a way that they can't just like pop 1 dragon with 1 card and end your turn, which is kind of the game state you're trying to get to in certain matchups.
And does this do you ever do things like Chromai with the extra action points, use them for like passing Mirage or that kind of stuff as well, or are you mostly putting on pressure?
Yes, definitely yes. You can also use it with Tome of Findal if that comes up. I don't really like to rely on that because you'll like play Chromai and then have this big plan and then they'll actually pop it and you are back down to 1 action point. But a lot of times you can attack with Chromai, Phantasm or no, and then if you ever end up with 2 action points, I'll like attack with dragons until they pop 1. And then once I'm back down to 1 action point, already got some tempo, already did well. Now I play out a passing. And then it's going to cost them 1 of their action points on their turn to get rid of that, or I'm further ahead. So yeah, definitely. Great question. There's a lot of utility there as well.
Nice. All right. Let's scooch on down to these 1 cost boys and girls.
Sure. So Kyloria's, Snatch Dragon is great. It's very squishy. It's easy for them to kill. It's like not that hard for them to block, but it's like very fair for the cost. It does cost you 2 cards to play it out, which isn't great, but it's good pressure. And if they do let you hit with it, you can start to do some like really, really busted things. Like I've pitched a blue and played double Kyloria and then into Miraging Metamorph on a turn. And, that's like really, really rude. And that's the dream, right? Is like these 1 cost dragons, you can pitch a red to play 1. You could pitch to Furnace, even play 2 more. But once you're really set up and you're Ash rich, which is like where you want to be, it's the best feeling when you're Ash rich. Then you can start to like pitch a blue and just play out 3 1-cost dragons. And that's where the deck gets like more busted if you've lived to see that day.
Nice. I had a Dromai player Kyloria me, and I was like, oh, it's okay if they draw a card. And so I let it hit. And I looked down. I'm like, oh, I guess he'd take my Amulet of Ice away from me now. And I was just like, shit, I really, really needed that card so I can mess you up later. And then it just sat on his side of the board. And I was like, that really sucks. But yeah, it does both. If they control an item, you steal it, or you draw a card if the item doesn't exist.
That's a really good point, because you will also steal copper tokens, which like Dory makes as a byproduct of playing spoils, but doesn't care about. So it like goes down in value once there's some copper tokens out.
Yeah, I have stolen a Teklo Pounder from a Dash player before, which was really funny because they were like, "Wait,
Nice.
what?" And it was just like, "This is mine now." It's pretty sweet.
Awesome.
All right, Miragai.
Maraga's, it's like the best dragon or the worst one. 4 health is like pretty good, but if you're not worried about poppers, it's like underwhelming. Uh, if they have poppers, it's great. Sometimes, I mean, pitch stacking them is great with like a power play, or getting 2 out at once in a turn is really good because then I don't know, it's like hard for them to kill both then on their turn. Sometimes you can like Arsenal or Miragai or Arsenal of Inserikai and then like play them out together. So you're capitalizing on the lack of Phantasm on a power dragon before they're able to deal with it, right? Because none of these dragons live long. They're not real dragons. They're just illusions, Don't get attached. Tomultai, the best ones, they just die really fast. So, it's just how it goes.
Yeah.
It's just conjuring something and then it poofs away, and that's just fine. They're very strong. So
yeah. I think I kept running into issues where like I would just play Miragai on its own and then just realize that was a bad move because they're just going to take care of it next turn. I do have a quick question on Miragai. When playing it, you're most of the time are you trying not to attack with it, or is that just dependent on the matchup and whether or not you think they have poppers?
Yeah, so sometimes I guess it depends on the value in the matchup. Like if I play it and capitalize on it and then attack with all my Ash Wings, and then I don't think they have a popper, or they're playing like Briar or something like that doesn't actually have a lot of poppers, I'll like attack and get that extra 2 damage in. Or they'll give me a card out of their hand. It doesn't really matter. But in matchups like, Oldhim or Bravo or, Rhinar or whatever, then I probably have attacked with it before, or you can use it to attack with its own Phantasm, but usually I will not attack with it because it's has more value as costing them one of their action points than it does for you getting 1 popper out of their hand.
Nice. Yeah. Awesome. All right. One of my favorite dragons, just because he looks chill and cool, is Mr. Yenderai here.
Yeah. Really, really great art. I actually had the brief thought of cutting this dragon at one point because it kind of feels like it doesn't really do much, but then I thought about it and it's like 2 cards or 1 resource and a card in an Ash for like, it's going to swing for 3 and then it's going to cost them like 4 to 6 damage to get rid of it, and that's still like very good value. All these dragons are also good even in like the Oldhim matchup, just to have a high density of dragons, because even if you play it out, it gives your dragons go again. So then even if it gets popped, it like stripped a card out of their hand by like applying this pressure, it put a counter on your Ghostly. It's still like fulfilling its role. So, and in some matchups, they'll just like not touch it, because it's like too hard to get rid of. So then as soon as you've attacked with it twice or something, it's really, really good value. And I mean, those are the best, really. Some matchups I prefer it because it's like kind of difficult for them to deal with, and it's just like, it's gonna be great value.
Yeah, I know against Fi with the Tiger Stripe Shuko, where damage can't be prevented, they can get around its ability. Is there any other interactions like that kind of like you should look out for when playing Yenderai?
Nice, great questions. You're doing great.
Thank you.
Great job.
I have a lot of questions. I'd like to be able to play this deck.
Not off the top of my head. It is important to remember that it prevents the damage. So if somebody tries to like Kadachi or like Spider Bite the token off because that's like easy value for them. Well, I guess Spider Bite doesn't matter, but if they do try to Kadachi the counter off because it's good value for them, it does interrupt their like mask trigger chain because it doesn't count as a hit because it's prevented. So I guess that's the only thing that I would keep in mind.
Nice. All right. So let's come down.
Or I guess for Salt the Wound type play,
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
Whenever
Anything
they
that
ping
cares
it off,
about
it's
hits.
not a
Yeah.
hit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess we'll do Necria, your favorite.
Best dragon.
Best dragon. It is good. I definitely I was one of the people sleeping on it at first, but when you realize how important Ash is, it definitely it is understandable why it's so important. So it's a 3 cost, so we're starting to get a little steep here, but tell us why Necria is the best.
Because it generates Ash for you. This whole deck is balanced because of the Ash requirement, right? Like the deck has an engine that balances it. It's like Levia or any deck with an engine. Everything would be overpowered if it didn't require Ash. And like Ash is a bit hard to quantify because it costs you pitching a red kind of or playing a sweeping blow. So it's hard to think of Ash in terms of value for cards, but Necri allows you to bypass that whole thing, and it's like really, really powerful. It's on hit, not just hitting a hero. So if you hit an ally, it also generates Ash. And also when it gets hit, every time it gets hit, it's not just once per turn, it generates an Ash. So oftentimes, if your opponent does target it, it'll give you, a couple Ash that turn. Or, if they don't target it, you can attack for 4 a bunch of turns in a row. The only caveat, I guess, is it's like really sad when this gets popped because it costs you a blue and a card and an Ash. So if you do that, then it gets popped. You're like pretty bummed out. So maybe in matchups like, like Viscerai or something, I might try to play it in conjunction with a Miragai or something like that. But even if you played it and then attack with it once, get 1 Ash, and then they kill your Miragai, and then you attack with it again, and then they pop it, that's also fine. It's just, it becomes really, really good value really fast. And like I said, in a number of matchups, like especially the faster ones, it's hard to generate Ash just because if you take the time to pitch a red to play a red sweeping blow against Fi, you're only threatening 3 damage for 2 of your cards, and that means you didn't block for 6. So anyway, in that matchup, I find it really hard to generate Ash, and this is just like the cheat, the cheat code for the deck. I'm just so grateful for Necria.
He's a nasty looking dragon, but very powerful.
Also, for some reason, it's really hard for both you and your opponent to do the math on killing it with the -1 counters.
Yeah.
Which is like a pretty funny puzzle that comes up all the time.
Nice. All right. How about Dominia? Or when they're legendary majestics.
These dragons are both really, really powerful. Dominia is always really powerful, actually. It's just a 1 of in the deck, though, and it's not like your win condition. I probably block with it more than I play it, to be honest. But if it is online, it's really good. Also, the cost is pretty good, just being a blue and a red.
Nice.
And then Tomultai is your win condition or part of it, like in Guardian matchups. You can play it to kill their Arcane Barrier. Or if they have a ton of Arcane Barrier for some reason, you can just kill their crown, which is like also just great. You can kill people's tunics or masks, like whatever crucial card. But
Storm
in a lot
Striders.
Oh yeah, munch those, chomp them down.
Terrible.
That's pretty satisfying, actually. Yeah. So yeah, like, but then there's like other characters like against Briar or something where it has a lot of value to get a piece of equipment, but it's not worth you like taking 20 damage to then play it out and hope you hit 2 reds, or if you hit 1, then it's just like The big dragons are very expensive and very situational, and oftentimes not worth the life trade of playing them out.
Mm,
Like if I take 20 damage against Fi to play Tomotai and hope I get his mask momentum, it's like great, but I'm probably going to lose that game now that it's 20-40,
yeah,
right? So, uh, very, very powerful. Don't get like too greedy or feel like you need to play them
yeah,
when you draw them.
totally. Yeah, I think I ran into that a lot in my first couple attempts at the deck of just being like, but I want to play my sweet tummy tie and munch on a mask or something. But
Yeah,
uh,
I've done that a number of times.
yeah, and it is interesting the choice of equipment. I definitely had an Oldhim game where I took Crown and the dude was like, "You should have taken my Null Rune. Like that was a bad move," and I was just like, "Well, whatever." Man, I took your crown. He's like, I only crowned like once. And I was just
Yeah,
like,
be
oh,
upset about it.
yeah. I was like, man, you're right.
Well,
You're
so
absolutely right.
an interesting thing to consider there is Burn Them All applies arcane damage separately. It doesn't stack. So even though it's a single source of a dragon dealing the damage, there's separate instances of it. So with just one AB, they can pitch a blue and block like 3 Burn Them Alls.
Mm-hmm.
Crown is only once per turn. So if for some reason they have 3 AB, don't kill an AB, kill
Yep.
Crown.
Yep.
It's the more powerful card in that matchup. If they only have 1 AB, you kill that, then they can Crown, but that's only preventing one. Then you're going to want to try to stack your Burn Them Alls, right? Because they can prevent one arcane a turn. The other 1 or 2 will get through. So that's pretty important. I don't have Remembrance in my list, but another strategy is like if you face a lot of Fatigue Guardian, you can Tomotai 1 AB and then Remembrance and then play it again to get their second piece of Arcane Barrier.
Nice.
Which I haven't found I need that. I'm like pretty happy in that matchup, but that's another route you can go.
Very nice. Yeah, I think in that match I was talking about earlier, the Dromai player got Tomotai out, and I think he took my tunic and my boots because I couldn't kill it in between turns. It was pretty sad. It was really not the way I wanted to start the calling, but that's what happened. Tomotai munched me up. All right, so that is the main board. Any other thoughts on that, or should we jump into the sideboard options?
Let's go look at the sideboard.
All right, pop over here. So equipment, we've got, of course, Ghostly Touch, Crown of Reflection, and Null Rune Gloves. So take us through. I'm not sure.
All right.
I know Ghostly Touch is good in the situations where it's good, but I've actually never been able to pull it off because I keep getting exposed to the elements. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of us.
Yeah, well, we have a contingency for that,
Yeah.
which sometimes you forget. But yeah, Ghostly Touch is great. It's one of your win conditions against Bravo and Oldhim. Maybe like half the time it doesn't come to that because you have several other win conditions. But without it, you're just like doomed to getting fatigued. So you have to play it. You also play it against Reinar and Levia as like the same contingency, but I've never had one of those games go to fatigue. They're always over like fairly fast. Oftentimes before second cycle.
Okay.
Or or a lot of times they hit second cycle, but they're over pretty quickly and you have other win conditions. But like I said, if you didn't bring Ghostly and they just brought a big deck and some AB, you would have to like pitch stack pretty perfectly and have them not like high roll you on attacks. It would be pretty tough. So it's a contingency there.
Nice. Is there anything to do when the Oldhim is trying to be smart and not pop your things, but they're just spending the time to kill them outright, or is that you just gaining tempo over the long run?
Yeah, so I've never really had much of an issue with this because I guess it's important to understand when this is happening because you don't want to like arsenal a D react and like hold a D react to like avoid getting, crushed by Endless Winter Pummel or whatever because they're trying to play more defensively. So then it's your job to play better, like more aggressively. You can pitch these big turns, like pitch your rakes and chromize and all of that to have huge second cycle turns to where they're put under so much pressure they have to pop something. Because what they try to do is pitch to crown and then use bastion, right? The shield.
Mm-hmm.
So then that can block 2 Aether Ashwings. The crown blocks 1, the shield blocks another, and then they'll like take 2 damage or something. And then
You
on
mean
their turn,
Ram's Head.
yeah, sorry. Yeah. And then on their turn, they'll like swing Winter's Wail and kill a Ashwing. Now you only have 2. So then they can prevent those 2 next turn with like shield and crown. And then they'll like rinse, repeat that. But the problem with that strategy is you're like pretty free to just play out dragons. So then once you start having like 3 Ashwings and a Yendurai and a Kyloria, and then you play like a Moragai and a Chromai at the same time or something. They're quickly unable to do that strategy because if they don't want to pop something, they have to take all that damage.
Mm-hmm.
So once you have enough damage on the board to threaten enough that it's no longer worth it, you're pretty fine. I mean, it's a very nuanced matchup, but like I've been there before too, where they'll kind of start trying not to put counters on it, but I've found like I always get to the place where they have to pop something every turn eventually.
Mm-hmm. So, and sorry if you did say this, I got distracted with my dog trying to walk in the room. You're building up counters on Ghostly Touch, and are you banking on Semblance coming in, or are you is Passing Mirage like the play, or is that something you're like pitch stacking and really like looking out for to make sure that when you get to that second cycle or late game that you can really try to pull this off? And then the second part of this question is like, what's the highest you've gotten Ghostly Touch to and done something gross with?
I don't know, maybe like 17 or something. Not really that high.
Just coming in for 16
but good enough.
damage.
Yeah. Like I said, a lot of times the game doesn't really come down to this either because you're trying to do a bunch of things, like pitch stack a bunch of dragon power plays, like I said, Chromais and Moragai. You're trying to pitch stack Optimi, and I do run one Semblance that's just a backup, but the main play is to Mage Master Boots, Passing Mirage out, and then pitch a blue to Ghostly Touch.
Gotcha.
So then on their turn, they have to kill your Passing Mirage. And then in theory, you can Ghostly Touch Semblance them also. It is important. You have to keep a certain number of blues in the deck for like pitch stacking Optimi and pulling off these like power plays like Ghostly into Semblance requires 3 blues.
Mm-hmm.
So don't block with every blue.
Yep.
Count your blues. Also keep some Passing Mirages in the deck, because you have to see one of those. But these plays come up, they're really like third cycle plays. Like the 3 things I just talked about happen when you have like 10 cards left in deck or something.
Nice.
Oftentimes I'll do stuff like I'll play out a Moragai and a Necria and a Rake or something, and then keep attacking that way, and then like pitch these plays to the bottom again. So then I'll see him with 6 cards left or whatever, because I'm just trying to like get more counters, and those plays are like the last resort at the end, unless I'm gonna die. But
yeah, and then
usually in a pretty good position.
Then the anti-Ghostly Touch tech being exposed to the elements, which is something that can destroy equipment. Walk us through what you're doing to prevent that, because I definitely got caught off guard, and I think I didn't include the right sideboard card to make sure it didn't happen.
Yeah, so you run 1 energy potion, and until you see that energy potion, you have to be able to pay for the exposed tax, right? Exposed to the elements is an ice fuse card, and it asks you to pay 2 or have your equipment destroyed. It costs them 3 cards to play it because it costs 2 itself, it costs itself, and then you have to fuse it. So anytime Oldhim has 3 cards or more, you can get exposed. A good way to do this is like you can play your turn and then move to Arsenal, and you only have 1 red in hand. But if they play exposed, you can like pitch to Furnace, get 2 resources, and then pay the tax. Or if they don't, then you can just Arsenal, right? And that's fine. But you're kind of playing this little game of chicken until you see your energy potion, and then you're playing it out. If your energy potion is the last card in hand and you play it, they can play exposed before Epoch resolves, so you can't use it in that instance. I'm only like medium good at protecting myself from getting exposed. It's hard to remember every single turn and like still play optimally and not just die in one of the many other ways you can die. Yeah. So it does make it difficult, but you know, we just do the best we can.
Nice. Yeah, it's definitely a hard play, and it's one of those things where you do your best to play around it, but you don't want to put yourself at like an extreme disadvantage by playing around it. You know, same thing when you're afraid of a pummel. If it is a pummel and you overblock, they're just going to Arsenal it and pummel you next time. So it can be kind of a moot point. So let me give a guess here. Is Crown of Reflection just for Arcane Barrier?
Mostly.
Oh, mostly. All right, cool. Tell me why else it's good.
So both of these cards. So I used to run the stilettos for the AB, but now that I just slimmed it down to the boots are always in because of the either Tome of Findal or Passing Mirage play. So those always stay in. The Null Rune gloves are in because, like I said, the Silken form isn't great, and I actually have been in a position where like Viscerai they'll like Rosetta your last Ashwing, and you can be in situations where you don't have any AB and like can die to Rune Chance. So having the gloves just kind of hedges your bets that way. So then Crown in conjunction with the gloves is only for Iyslander and Kano. Just to have some AB on deck, you would probably be fine with 1 AB into Iyslander because your win con there is paying through their taxes, not necessarily blocking their arcane barrier. But this has literally never come up for me, but there is kind of a cheeky play you can do with Crown where if they scour you and try to kill like your Burn Them All or your Passing, you can activate Crown and swap in a new aura from your hand if that comes up.
Nice.
Which is kind of like anti-scour tech. But again, that's like you're running it for the AB, not for that little counter.
Yeah.
But if that ever comes up, I'm going to be pretty psyched.
Nice. Awesome. All right, cool. So let's move on down to some of these sideboard choices. We've got a few, so let's get into it.
Sure. So in the show notes here, we will include a link to a full sideboard guide, which shows what I take in and out for each matchup. So I might get something wrong when we talk about these. But Sigil of Solace is basically a main board card because it is one of those starters. And it's good against arcane damage because the life gain is really hard on wizard. And it also is just really good against like Fi, Briar, Viscerai, any like hero that likes to chip you. Playing Sigil of Solace makes up for like 3 chips, so it's really powerful that way. It's good. Like it's great in your arsenal to give your dragons go again. It's just great. I'm pretty sure it only comes out against Dory because it doesn't block. And like gaining life is not part of your win condition there. It might come out somewhere else, but I don't think so. I think that's the only one. So that's why it goes in the sideboard. Rake is the same way. This card is excellent. It just There might be one always in the main board, actually. I'm not sure. But there's like certain instances, like against Fi, I think I run 1 Fate Foreseen and 2 Rakes. Just because Rake blocks for 2 and it's like kind of expensive to play out. It costs you 2 cards, is Ash negative and makes 3 Ash Wings, which is like good, but anyway. So I just run 2 in that instance. It's like it's not the fastest card.
Are you often making all 3 Ash Wings, or like are you just judging that based on how much ash you have kind of at any given moment?
Yeah, I almost always make all 3 just because it feels pretty bad to play it and make 2. If you play it and you're gonna like Arsenal a Necria or a Vinny, you might leave an Ash on the table. But if I play it and I'm gonna like Arsenal a Sigil or a Rabble or something, then I might burn all of my Ash because I have a way, albeit a pretty expensive way, to gain Ash on the next turn. Or if I'm gonna Arsenal a D-React, it's like I'm not gonna get completely locked out. I can make Ash depending on how my next turn goes. So kind of situational there. There is a pretty cool play turn 1 or turn 0 where you can pitch to play Rake, like pitch a red to play Rake. That makes an Ash on pitch. Rake will make an Ash on resolution, but before it resolves, you then have played a red card, so you can pitch to Furnace to make another Ash. So then it's still Ash neutral. You're going to burn them all, but you can, starting with no Ash, you can play Rake for 3 Ash Wings.
Nice. Yeah. See, those are those Furnace interactions that are like tricky, and you just got to know that you can do that, which is really cool.
Yeah.
All right. Then we have the big Papa Dragon.
Optimize awesome. It's so much fun. It's so cool. I've won games where, because you're always trying to like ghostly touch, but then it comes up and you've like pitch stacked it twice. It gets really easy to pitch stack when you only have like 12 cards left in deck, by the way. It gets way easier. And then I've just like, played boots into passing into Optimi because I know it's going to deal 6 arcane. This dragon's like pretty fun to high roll people with burst cycle if it like somehow comes up, but like in the second cycle matches when you've learned to pitch stack it pretty well, it's just a tank. It's so insane. So yeah, love it. It just comes out because it's like against Iyslander, it's too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
You need those blues to pay through their taxes, even if you somehow see it with 2 blues. So it's like not worth it.
Is that the only matchup it comes out in?
I believe so.
Nice.
Because otherwise it just it's like a red that blocks for 3 also.
Yeah.
But in Iyslander, I'm not trying to see like 3 expensive dragons in hand and a red,
Yeah.
So that's why it comes out then. Yeah.
Totally. Awesome. Whoops. Getting wonky.
Nice.
Here we go. All right. Passing Mirage. It seems pretty good in this deck.
Yeah, it's amazing. We've already talked about a lot of the uses. It's also a blue, which is important against like Iyslander and Viserai and Kano and like Ice Lexi or whatever, right? It's now that Bullender is the way to play that deck. It's also very good to play out. Also, sometimes you can just get a kind of high rolly start where turn 0 you like play Passing Mirage. Like, oh great, I like play Sigil, pitch to Furnace, play Passing. That's like really the dream. That almost never happens, but maybe one of those things will happen.
Yeah.
And then it's pretty good.
Nice.
It's part of I put it in against Viserai, it's a blue, so it helps combat the arcane also. But I put it in against Dash. They have a lot of poppers. So it's easier for them to kill it with their pistol, but it's just a very functional card.
Nice. And energy potion we talked about for the expose the elements. Is that in any other matchups as well?
It goes in against Wizards and Viserai.
Yeah, okay. Just extra
But because
arcane.
mostly because it's a blue. If you can play it out, it's like great, but it's
Gotcha.
not for that. Um, Semblance is the same thing. It's like in case they exposed your, um, your gloves, you can still like optimize semblance them at the end or something like that. Like games are really close without even activating the gloves, so you can like very much win. Um, you know, despite despite your gloves being taken away.
Nice.
It's not, I like never play it. It's not a great card, but I've left it in just because it's also blue. Like you need blues for Iyslander and Kano and Viserai, right? And Semblance also functions against Guardian, so it stayed in as a one of. If there's like a better blue, you can run it,
Mm-hmm. Totally. All
Yep.
right, and then we have little Uvia over here, cost 2, and she's got a really interesting ability. At the start of your turn, or when Uvia enters the arena, transform up to 1 Ash you control into an Ether Ashwing. So she's just a Ashwing factory.
Yeah.
With a huge life.
Yeah, which is pretty cool that she just makes ash wings, right? This is my second to least favorite dragon. She's like the 2 cost, she's like hard to play out. It's hard to have enough ash to capitalize on her, and then it's hard to generate even more ash to like keep up with it. In some matchups like Iyslander where it's stronger, it's still hard to make enough ash to like have great turns and make an Ashwing every turn.
Mm-hmm.
But it just like, I think the 6 health is like its main upside, right? Because so then in the Guardian matchups, you can play Uvia and it's going to make Ashwings, which they have to pop as they get attacked, or they're going to kill it.
Mm-hmm.
But if they kill it, like Oldhim can't kill it with the hammer. If they're going to kill it, it's going to like save you 6 life, or 2 cards you would have blocked with or whatever. So specifically because of that like threat of continued dragon generation and then the amount of life it saves you, I do think it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's just like it's like an impossible ash factory to keep up and running,
Yeah.
It's too much.
Because it is important. It's not a May, like you have to do it if you
No,
have
it May. It is May. Yeah.
Oh, it is a May, but it doesn't say May.
It says transform up to 1
up
ash
to
you
1.
control.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was confusing myself.
No, that would be insane. I would probably cut it if you had to do it.
Never mind what I said. I should edit it out, but I'm not going to. Yeah,
we're good.
This one's really interesting to me. Because you're not attacking with it. It attacks for 1. It's there to make little baby dragons and just overload the board state. And this also happened to me in that Dromai game, first round of the calling. They got Uvia out. I passed.
It is very good in the mirror.
Well, I was on Iyslander, but
gotcha.
It was, I had like a 6 attack in hand and I didn't go for Uvia, and I regretted it because I got swarmed because it easily gets out of control. Yeah. It was tough. Learned a lot that game. Anyways, now these look like some spicy cards, so let's get into this.
Yeah, this is some aggressive stuff over here. Vin Sarakai is just great in aggro matchups. Like Phi, Katsu, Briar, Viserai, whatever. It just like demands they block with 3 cards and then also kill it or pop it. Sorry, block with 2 cards and then also kill it. Oftentimes you can kill it with like a Phoenix Flame or a Rosetta. It's not really a big deal, but it's just always really good value from your end to strip half their hand. If it gets popped, it sucks. But again, you can like pair it with Maragai or pair it with passing.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of 5 people basically read this card as take 9 damage.
Yeah, and they do.
Yeah.
Which you're like, oh, great. And then they have to hit it with a Phoenix Flame. So that's like a 10-point, I don't know, value for your 2-card hand plus an Ash, whatever that's worth. But yeah, it's I mean, it's really hard for them to block that much, and it's just vanilla damage.
Hmm.
So if they do block it with equipment, you're like, well, great, then I can dust up you or whatever. So yeah, very very strong dragon. I actually cut it in the Iyslander game because of its cost and the fact that it has 1 health. It's like easier to ping, so that's
Yeah.
not ideal. I don't. I'd have to see if I include if I included in. I think I included in the Guardian matchups, but it's just like another dragon. And if you compare it with not having Phantasm, great. But if you just play it and it gets popped, that's just what you're doing every turn, you know?
Hmm.
So oftentimes you'll play it though, and then attack with an Ashwing first. Then they have to take damage and then take that. Or pop the Ashwing and then like hammer a Vinny, it's just it's like it's always pretty good.
Nice. Miraging Metamorph. I love this card personally.
I do too. I was pretty upset about this card when Prism was hammering down with it. But now that I'm playing it, I really like it. I used to run CNCs. I used to run Phantasmaclasms. I tried a number of things. I just settled on this because of that like blue to blue costing card ratio. Miraging costs you 2 cards for 7 damage and makes an Ash. If you run CNC, you have to see it in conjunction with a blue, or it costs you 3 cards to CNC. CNC is really good against like Fi and stuff, but against anybody that runs Crown and Providence, it's less good.
Hmm.
So, I really liked having Miraging in the deck. You can also like I said, pitch a blue, play out 2 1-cost dragons, and then end with Miraging if nothing gets popped, which is like huge value. And again, just the 2-card hand for 7 and an Ash is huge. Like if you play CNC or even Phantasmaclasm or Embermaw or anything off of a blue, you don't get an Ash out of it. But playing Miraging, you do get an Ash, which is just great. So I really like it in the deck. It's another like Ender, right? It's another card without Go Again. So if something gets popped, you're like left stranded. It has all these downsides. It has Phantasm, but lastly, there is like a cheeky thing you can do in the Guardian matchups. I think I just run one, but you can like pitch it. So then at the end of the game, when you have your burn them alls out or something, you like play Miragai, attack with a dragon with no Phantasm, and then you just attack with Miraging Metamorph. And so if they pop it, you get to duplicate your like passing or burn them all or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a pretty bad situation actually for them to be in because they have to block with a non-sixer, which is also
Can be
an issue.
Can be difficult. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Dust Up. Dust Up is a cool card. I feel like it's kind of a sleeper hit.
It is. I actually didn't used to like it because it doesn't have Go Again.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the value is just there, right? Like it's hard for them to continue to block these like little hit effects you have. So once their, armor's gone, when you threaten Dust Up, it's great. If you're low on Ash, you don't have to make an Ashwing. You can just make an Ash with it when this hits. Or if you do make an Ashwing, it's like 4 damage, and then you have an Ashwing that soaks up a damage, or it's just like really good value numbers wise.
Mm-hmm.
It also fills that role like chipping down Dory before you're hitting him second cycle, or like you have to block out Fi and then you 1-card swing with Dust Up, or like Iyslander strips all your cards, so on your turn you just Dust Up them. It just has a lot of value, and it's a resource card and blocks 3.
Yeah, pretty sweet. I remember one of our patrons, Peyton, had been singing the praises of red and I think blue Dust Up early on when he was testing Dromai, and after I tried his deck, I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. People look at it and they're like, crap, I want to block this, but I also don't want to block this.
Yeah, and then you get really good value out of it.
Yeah, totally. Either way, like if they block it, you're like, cool, you just spent 2 cards on this. Like,
yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
I actually don't. Everybody else loves the blues. I don't run the blues.
Mm-hmm.
I think the big sixers have more utility.
Mm-hmm.
I could put the blues in instead of pursuit. Um,
Gotta live
but
that dream though.
it's just blocking the blue only costs them one of any card or like one piece of armor. And I find the bigger hitting cards to be better, but I could be wrong, you know.
Yeah, if it works for you, that's what's important.
Yep.
All right, then we've got the tome.
Yep. This is the hot card that everybody's on. Most people run 3. I've been running 2 because it's like if you see it in conjunction with a chromai that doesn't get popped, or when you see the first one and put it in arsenal and find the breathing room to like boots play it out, pretty good. It gains you life and cards and a little bit of tempo. But other than that, it's like a pretty dead card. It doesn't do anything. It's yellow. It blocks for 2. I actually don't much like this card because it just feels like you're hoping things will line up and you're trying to like kind of high roll your opponent, which I think is like actually pretty important in the game to have like big power plays. But if I had more sideboard space, I would run 3. I've just been running 2 because like I said, like you do it once, it's great. And then like, I don't know, if you see a couple in a game and it's offline, they're just like really, really bad. Yeah. So I don't know. Go to 3 if you love it. I don't so much.
Yeah. What matchups are you bringing it in for?
Anything that doesn't have the boots passing play.
Okay.
So probably, I guess, everything except Guardians. I even changed, since I don't run stilettos, into Iyslander anymore, or Wizard. I have my AB in other slots. This is actually important. Now the boots are free to run the Tome of Findal boots play like into Iyslander, which they hate the life gain. It's really hard for them to deal with. So, having your AB in other slots and then having that online in that matchup is also really good. They're also yellow, so you have a bit more money in that matchup. But yeah, it's like always this or passing.
Nice. Icelanders hate it.
Yeah. I don't bring these in against, brutes. Yeah. Because it's not necessary, but.
Nice. All right. And then I think this is our last bit, some little defensive package we got here.
Yep. This is the suite. Sinks and Fates are pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, they're good.
Right. Yeah, they're great. I run, 3 Sinks, 1 Fate into 5, just because you're trying to tempo them and you don't want to have a garbage hand when you get a window. I run like all 9 of these into Guardians to not get like dominate, crushed, or pummeled or whatever, against Brute, it's really important to arsenal one of these because of the intimidate, like barraging interaction. That's also true against like Azalea or Bravo or anybody that's, going to dominate you or whatever. They're just, everybody knows they're great when they're great. One thing that Fate does is it does interact with like Ravenous Rabble and Dominia. So if you block with the Fate Foreseen, remember that if you're going to play a Rabble or a Dominia next turn, you will be revealing that card again, which sounds really simple, but sometimes you forget.
Yeah. Totally.
I feel like there's another card it interacts with, but anyway. And then Sand Cover. I was on Oasis Respite, which is better into Wizard, and it's also a really good card. In a number of matchups, it costs you like 2 cards to block. It makes you an Ash, which is good, but that high cost made me just cut it.
Yeah.
And Sand Cover is one of my favorite cards in the deck. Maybe my favorite card. It's so good the more you play with it. It's pretty insane. It like gets around Dominate out of hand. You can play it preemptively. So if somebody plays Barraging Beatdown, you can play Sand Cover before you get intimidated at all. And then that's going to float out there and block whatever damage. Doesn't count as a blocking card, but it blocks for 4, which is really good.
Nice.
It gets around CNC Pummel. So Arsenal Sand Cover, block 6, red Pummel comes out. You just full block it with Sand Cover and you feel like a god, right? Like, because that's the coolest play in the game and you just answered it.
Nice.
So that's really, really enjoyable. I guess there is kind of one downside if you get a red Aether Ice Vein played against you and you play Sand Cover, it's not a target, so they're gonna Waning Moon you in response. So what you have to do is pitch a blue, block the 2 from their Waning Moon, Sand Cover resolves, blocks 4 of the 5 from Aether Ice Vein, and you have 1 floating from what you pitch to block the 5th. So it like works just fine. You just have to pitch a blue in conjunction with it.
Gotcha.
Which might not leave you with quite as much to pay through their taxes or whatever, but they also did no damage. So
Nice.
Oasis Respite in those situations, like against Aether Wildfire or against Aether Ice Vein, is much better because it targets something. But so if you have a lot of wizards, put Oasis Respite in. It's a great card. Just the difficulty nowadays lies in the, you know, limited sideboard size for a wide field. So, you know what, do it with it what you will, but don't write off Sand Cover.
Nice.
It's excellent.
You came around to this card, right? Like at first you didn't like it. Is that right?
Yeah, because when you're first learning the deck, you find it kind of hard to find like an ash balance or like value ash or generate ash. So then it feels like it's just like a sink below, but it also burns one of your ash, which feels terrible. Which is like kind of true, but once you learn how to, like now that I know how to play like, you know, the Bravo matchup, I guess I probably just prioritize generating ash a little better. You know, I'll like play blue sweeping blow. I'm like, shit, yeah, 2 ash, 1 real damage. This is going great, you know?
Nice.
So it's like much better now. I don't put it in against Fi or in some of those games where it's hard to make enough ash and you like don't want to be burning through it. So that is still a downside, just like a lot less of one.
Nice. Awesome. All right. Well, that covers all the cards. How about we talk a little more specifically about the matchups and kind of your, strategy going into. I think we'll focus on the kind of most prevalent heroes at the moment in the meta, which would be Fi, Iyslander, Briar, and Oldhim, and then maybe kind of dip into a couple after that. So let's talk about Fi because I think that's that's the hardest one, and it's just brutal sometimes.
It is, and it's not great. And I will say, most Fi matchups, I get them to like 3 and I lose. So I haven't like solved the Fi matchup. It's quite hard. It depends on your opponent. If they're really good though, I think it's pretty difficult. This is a first cycle matchup and it's a tempo one. You cannot fatigue Fi because they have these huge explosive combo turns. And the game will be going pretty well until they pull off the first one of these. And then all of a sudden it's like going pretty badly. So you have to tempo them just because it's like impossible to, block well enough. Making Ash early, like first or second turn, is paramount, right? Because later you're going to spend those without the breathing room to, replenish them as much as you would like. So you're tempoing, right? You're making intelligent exchanges. You're trying to stop the mass trigger. Necria, Vincerikai have huge value here for like damage or life and ash generation. Dust Up and Miraging are great because they're like low cost for big damage. Yep. And I guess that's tomes come in. If you high roll them with a tome, great. But that's kind of all I got to say about that matchup. It's quite difficult because a lot of times I'll be winning like 25-10 maybe, but they can threaten that 25 fairly easily. And then once you're within like the kill range, they don't have to threaten your dragons, right? So when you're at if you're at 5 life or 8 life, they can strip your whole hand, threatening well over lethal. And then dragons don't have go again. So you can only attack with 1.
Yeah.
And then they can block with one card and have like a 4-card hand coming back, and then you're just in this like very losing cycle.
Yeah.
Um, so even when you're ahead early, it's like never quite won, because once they can threaten lethal, it makes it much trickier for you.
Nice. Yeah, it's a tough one, especially when they just, are good at sequencing their on hit effects against your dragons. They're drawing lots of cards. They just keep going, and if they high roll Art of Wars real early, it's pretty not
Yeah,
much to do in that case. And so just hold on to your butt and hope you can survive long enough to do something.
definitely.
All right, Iyslander, and I'm curious to uh, if you're kind of hedging against a more traditional Iyslander, or if everyone's just Michael Hamilton Bowlander these days.
I'm playing it like it's Bowlander, but not a lot changes. Um, you would run Passing Mirage either way because it's a blue,
Mm.
right? So I run 16 blues in my deck, which is much more than a lot of Dromai's run, specifically, like I said, for wizards and ice and Viscerai,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to survive that. So going up to 16 blues helps you pay through their taxes pretty well, actually. And the only thing I changed for Bowlander really is I like prioritize playing out a Passing Mirage,
Mm.
or like arsenaling a Mirror Guy and then like playing it out when I think I can play out a Kyloria with it or something like that. Right.
Mm.
So because the Phantasm actually matters. Besides that, the matchup kind of goes the same. You would think that you're on the clock because they can like Frost Hex combo you, but the reality is like they're on the clock, right? You're like winning with board state. Um, Once you get out a certain board state, though, you can kind of change your priorities a little bit, because at some point they're gonna like ping a dragon out of the air or pop it or something. So you don't need 20 dragons. Like 10's fine, right? Or 8 or whatever. So then at that point you can kind of block some arcane, save enough cards to pay through their taxes, and just kind of wait until they can't stop you. Because some turns will be like a channel like Frigid turn or a Hypothermia turn that'll just kind of end it, or Blizzard. So you're just kind of playing a game of patience. But like I said, with the sand covers and the blues, and playing intelligently, um, it's just like a really favored matchup for you. The life gain, the sigils and tomes, it's all really hard on them. Uh, I guess the last tip I would say is attack with your large dragons first,
Mm.
because so for anybody who doesn't know, the way it works is they can, if they play a blue spell out of arsenal, which they're allowed to do on their turn, that can target anything, not just a hero, they can target your dragon that you're attacking with before it becomes an attacking card, or I guess it doesn't really matter actually in this instance, and like quote ping it out of the air. And because it doesn't resolve, go again doesn't resolve, and your turn ends.
Mm-hmm.
So if you attack with an Aether Ashwing, there's a lot of things like frosting that'll just ping it and end your turn, or things like Aether Hail, a lot of things that do 2 damage and will end your turn.
Mm-hmm.
Ice Bolt is the only one that does 3, I think. Oh yeah, it's the only one that does 3. Um, and sometimes you will have to attack with Kyloria with no Phantasm, and you're just like rolling the dice, right?
Mm-hmm.
One turn a game, they'll like Ice Bolt and Metacarpus nodes it to like ping Dominia or something. But it's just all part of it, right? You're like working through these spells, you're like always pressuring them, and then when they don't have the answer, you're like gonna steamroll them.
Mm-hmm.
So
And I heard
anyway,
too, Michael Hamilton was saying that there is a uh, kind of move for Iyslander if you have like burn them all out, that they can ping your dragon before, as you said, before it becomes attacking, so it doesn't trigger burn them all, so they can kind of get around that arcane damage as well. So that's just something to be aware of that I actually didn't know, which is interesting.
oh yeah, that is a really good point. Any effect like Azulai's effect as well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because when you declare a card as attacking, It actually goes on the stack and is not
Yep.
resolved to be an attacking card to then
Yep.
resolve as an attack,
Yep.
which seems a bit much, but
He said he
that's how
said
it
he had to
works.
call 3 judges to get that because he was like, I know this is correct, and the first 2 judges did not agree, and he was like, no, this is right. And
Oh,
then
geez. No, he's right. Yeah.
the third guy was like, yes, it is right, but then no one explained it to his opponent. It was a funny story on their latest podcast. Anyways, all right, cool, very very nice. Briar, let's get into Briar. This one, another hard one, just because they can just come at you so aggressively.
Yeah. So this is the matchup of the top four I had the least practice in. So I was the most worried about going into Worlds. Uh, I do run Null Rune gloves because I have been in a situation in practice where um, it's kind of like down to the wire, but they can just ping you with an arcane like a Bramble Spark or something, and then you're like, huh. While I may not be, you shouldn't be blocking arcane most of the time. It is important to have it so they don't just get the win for free.
Yeah.
Um,
Is it just a one AB then?
yeah,
Okay.
unless you have Ash Wings, but again,
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
they Rosetta your Ash Wings because it still sends the arcane at you.
Mhm.
So in this matchup, I try to kind of aggressively tempo them, maybe like if you get beefy dragons out on the board, it costs them, their attacks, cards out of their hand to kill them, and then you're like winning cycles in those regards. However, on their CMH turns, or like Force of Nature CMH, which are pretty gnarly, I do try to like mostly block those out because you do block really well. Like if you have I try to put a defense reaction in Arsenal if I think a um, channel turn's coming or they're played one out or whatever. And then if you have a D-react in Arsenal and like one in hand, I mean, you can block like, what's that? 9, 13, 17 damage plus armor.
Mhm.
So you can definitely stop any like draw hit effects or whatever in that way. This matchup is just scary because Briar like auto wins, I don't know, 1 out of 5 of her matches or whatever it is. Like that deck can just do 40 damage. So there's not much to be done there. But in like just in a normal match, I've found that the Briar matchup actually isn't really that bad. Between your defensive capabilities and they kind of want to just like go face.
Mhm.
So if they have to dedicate cards to attacking your dragons, you're just like free to play more dragons, and it's actually quite good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Dragons equal power. All right. And then the last of the dreaded four is the Oldhim. And this one, yeah, you got to note here, determining if they're aggro or fatigue. I think that's really interesting because I think the Oldhim builds right now are very, uh, you know, they're all over the place. He can do a lot. Apparently, he's a good hero.
Yeah, definitely. And their strategies into Dromai vary as well, I guess, depending on what their testing team found or not, because they can, as we talked about before, they can really sit back and try not to pop things and just attack them, or they can kind of just like go face and like I said, like endless winter pummel, or just play red thunderquake every turn or things like that, which is kind of a lot to deal with, and very polarized strategies facing you. Um, Determining which one they are is not really that. I mean, it's important because if they're trying to fatigue you, you need to like manage your resources better. By resources, I mean like pitch stacking your threats and like managing how many dragons you have in deck and things like that. If they're just full on aggro going face, you can like block with more dragons to maintain a bit of life, and because it'll be easier for you to make a board state because they're dealing with it less well. Like I said, I have found that once you've traded some life for some board state, you're forcing a card out of their hand every turn, right? Because you're threatening too much damage, so they have to pop something. So whether they start out one way or the other, it always seems like in the end they have to, you know, they like have to pop an Ashwing because it's unsustainable to take that much damage.
Mm.
Um, we talked about like burn the malls and AB and like, you know, if they only have one arcane barrier, you can tomol tie it. Sometimes it's better to pitch a couple burn the malls than when you see your third one first cycle to play it out because then you have the graveyard to sustain it. And it's a lot better value for them to pitch a blue and block like 3 arcane from 3 burn the malls than if you spread it out over the whole game. And you know, if they're like pitching a blue to block 1 arcane and blocking with a 6er, pop an Ashwing or whatever, that's 2 cards out of their hand and they only have 2 left. So you're like pretty happy with that and you're going to win the momentum game and kind of overwhelm them there. Let's see, what else have I got here? This is like the most complicated matchup because of the like edging for exposed and playing out your E-pot and then like determining what their strategy is so you can like counter strategize and stuff like that. Another thing that's really important is going into the second cycle, you want to have like extra ash. Like you know, sometimes I'll have like 10 ash or something, which is like actually quite easy to do. But again, when you hit like pitch a blue, play 3 dragons, or you know, pitch a blue, play 2 dragons, a free dragon, and a rake. That could be 6 ash you're going to burn through and make none, right? Or I guess make 1. But that'll come up and you'll really burn through it. Your sand covers cost an ash. You need to like have them online, et cetera, et cetera. So stacking ash for that cycle is pretty clutch. Like I said, Tomol Tie, their Arcane Barrier Crown. Second cycle, burn them alls, you know, Chromai, Miragai, rake type turns, overwhelm them. And then again, the Optimi, the third cycle, Optimi, pitch stack, you know, in conjunction with or right before the boots ghostly turn, and then you have semblance in there, is just like a lot of win conditions. I mean, I've like, you know, I beat Bravo before where it's just like, I like got really lucky and saw like Miragais back to back early, so I just pitch stacked them all together, and then I just had 3 Miragais out in the second cycle.
Nice.
And like they killed one, but then I like got a passing out somehow too. So then it's like, even though my, you know, my boots is my win, I'm like already winning, right? And like going to win the game. So there's just like a lot of different ways to win. They're all just fairly difficult.
Yeah.
So you're like trying to get them all going, or you know. Anyway,
nice.
That was a bit long-winded, but that, like I said, that matchup is like very complex.
Totally. I mean, it seems generally Dromai is complex. You know, everything you've talked about is like you have a plan, but then you're always reacting to what's in your hand and what's going on, and you know, thinking about your pitch stacking or not. You know, and it's difficult. It seems really cool, and I after talking to you, I really want to get back into it. I think I stepped away just because I was having some just issues of only playing fives basically and just getting housed at Armory and just not understanding what the decks I was playing were trying to do. But I feel like now I understand a bit more, and it's not just a linear deck, which I do enjoy that. I do enjoy the kind of complex, you know, thinking space that decks like this can do, but it also just requires more reps to really get that comfort level and be able to decide, you know, quickly what your best move is and what your best chances are. So really awesome. I think we'll leave the other matchups. We'll, like Isaac said, we'll post a sideboard. This is already a pretty long video, but I think we want to get into is there any you have a list of cards that you kind of didn't like, but we kind of already talked about some of those. Maybe let's talk about like cards you might add in the future, and I'm also curious about Dynasty changes as well.
Sure, sounds good. So some cards I don't have, Dunebreaker Centipede or Billowing Mirage Red, which are both just fine, right? Like I would consider adding those back in if I had more space. The only thing is like off a 2 card hand, those are pretty underwhelming. Um, Billowing's great against Guardians though, because it makes an Ashwing. Dunebreaker is like really good value when you have a bigger turn. They just like weren't working for me. I did test Phantasmaclasm quite a bit. I actually really like that card.
Mm.
Against certain decks, like Briar or Viscerai, you can strip not only a popper, but you could also strip like a power card when they really want to see, which is really nice. Um, you know, like I said, it also strips a popper. There's a lot of decks that play like Dash or whatever that only have one popper in hand.
Hmm.
Uh, I ended up cutting it though because it's like the another blue cost card in favor of the Miraging Metamorphs, which I think is better for my cost curve.
Hmm.
But Phantasmaclasm is definitely great. Um, I already talked about Oasis Respite and Remembrance. Again, you can double Tomotai, you can
Hmm.
double Optimi with Remembrance. I don't like it because it ruins your pitch stack. So if you see it before you're through the first cycle of your deck, you're just going to shuffle all that back together again. So you don't have an opportunity to like, pitch the rest of your Asvalize and Chromize together, or I don't know, play out another Rake just to like gain some more tempo against Guardian. It's like really, really weird to to shuffle your deck halfway through
Yeah.
when you're playing for that second cycle. But the benefits are definitely like huge. Like even if you just shuffled 3 Chromize back in and shuffled, and then you're like working towards a much quicker second cycle, that's like a much denser power level in that deck. So I could see why people run it. Um,
Nice.
I tried That All You Got, like against Rosetta or Phi. I didn't like it because it's a dead card unless you pull it off. And, sometimes they just don't attack you with a 2 power card
Hmm.
unless it's a Phoenix Flame. But sometimes the mass trigger isn't on the Phoenix Flame. Or sometimes the Phoenix Flame or the Rosetta are like hitting a dragon, not you. So it's just like was offline most of the time. I think it might merit more testing because that replacement effect in cards is really, really good.
Yeah.
I just tried it a bit, didn't like it, and stubbornly cut it. But
Yeah. I
anyway,
Yeah, I agree. I think that card it's super interesting. The upside is so high, but then when you don't hit it, it feels bad because it is so high. So it's just otherwise it's just a block for 3, which, is fine, but
yeah,
it doesn't do anything, actively on your turn.
yeah. If you're only blocking for 3 with it, it's like then your hand's much less flexible, because you have to block with that card.
Hmm.
But, um, I also mentioned Billowing Mirage Blue is like just fine, right? But I don't know, whatever you want.
Yep.
The last card is This Round's on Me. I did not have a chance to test, but I think is like with Arachne coming out and the existence of Phi and the new Katsu with all the cats. Um, I think This Round's on Me will be a deck staple. It's like a bit scary giving Phi an extra card, but if you give them one card that attacks for 3, but then all of their attacks in the turn get -1, that's like, say their card only attacks for 2 now, and they're getting like -5 damage out of the turn. It just like maths out pretty well.
Mm.
Um, it also, you can pitch a red to play it, make an ash, and it blocks for 3. So I think This Round's on Me I'll probably make room for 3 of in the deck in place of Pursuits and probably 1 Enigma Chimera or
Mm.
something, but we'll see.
Nice.
I think that card's very, very good.
Yeah, it's showing up in a lot more decks right now, which I think is interesting.
Hmm. Very good against Ashwings too.
True. Nice. All
Um,
right. Do you want to talk about the cards you omitted, or should we just go into Dynasty stuff?
yeah, no, I'll run through this really
Okay.
quick. I don't run CNC for the same blue cost reason. It's very good against Phi though, because of the on hit. Um, but because of the 2 cost and the not threatening decks that run Crown, I decided to cut it. It just doesn't synergize with my deck. if you're going into a 5 meta, I think you have to run it, and I probably should have. I just couldn't find room in the sideboard. So, um, some people run Time Snap Potion. I don't like the cards that you have to like play out, because on the turn where you play out Time Snap against a Guardian, you like didn't attack with an Ashwing and have it get popped. So you're like handing them full tempo back, which is maybe okay, but it's like a pretty big waste of tempo or waste of a turn. And, you know, I'm like kind of stuck in my ways and have found the boots and semblance like suffice, right? It's just fine. If you have the boots and a time snap out, that's pretty good, because then you could play a passing into a stacked Optimi, and then later you could play boots into Ghostly. So might be worth cutting semblance for the time snap, to be honest. But I don't know. Merits testing.
Yep.
I cut Thamai's. That dragon's just really bad, except against like Iyslander or Kano. But with with Icelander's big attacks now, it's easier for them to deal with it or threaten you despite it. And it's like pretty expensive. And it's just like, you don't need it, right? Like, it's good against Iyslander. It's bad in every other matchup.
Yeah.
So I just cut it.
You're already pretty good in that matchup.
Yeah.
Totally.
Phantasmal Footsteps are like really handy to make an Ash and like block a breakpoint like Snatch or whatever, right? Like I said, you make an Ash instead of just burning 2 of your cards. But it just simplified the deck to always run Mage Masters. And even in matchups where like Phantasmal Footsteps is really good, like against Dash, in that matchup, you're actually the beatdown. So I didn't often find myself pitching a blue to Phantasmal Footsteps or pistols, because I'm not actually trying to fatigue them. I was actually trying to be the aggressor if they're playing that match correctly. So then once I started looking at it like that, where I was like, geez, and like even in the best matchup, you know, this card isn't exactly what I'm trying to do. But if you do run like Dunebreaker Centipede and stuff like that, you kind of need Footsteps, at least into decks with a lot of poppers. You can also do a cheeky thing where you like pitch a blue to play blue Embermaw Centipede, 1 floating, and then if Guardian pops it, you can like get your action point back, which is pretty fun. Or if they don't pop it, they're like facing 6 damage. So they definitely do have a lot of value. It merits a lot of very like nuanced testing to see where exactly Footsteps versus boots and those packages kind of fit in.
Totally.
So I cut them.
Nice. Yeah, they always felt weird to me, just because like they don't act in the way that they do in Prism, where they, you know, give you the action point back that much, because you're not running that many Phantasm attacks. And coming from Prism into Dromai, I felt like I was like, these are just useless, and I would always forget that I could block with them. So that's interesting, and I'm you know, I agree in cutting them. It seems kind of like useless most of the time, and just I like the simplifying your game plan overall is like a good choice in a deck that's already pretty complicated.
Yeah.
All right, so Dynasty out yesterday. It's a whole new world for Dromai. What's that world looking like for you?
Almost all the illusionist cards are, I think, for either Prism or an illusionist that does not exist yet. So I was like pretty underwhelmed or disappointed as a Dromai player on the new tools. But looking at what we did get, I will probably run Dust from the Shadow Crypts, which is the 0 cost block for 3 red ash that you can like play out from your hand. And then it reads, if any other dragon except Necria is on top of this, it has Phantasm. If Necria is on top of it, it does not have Phantasm. So pretty powerful card. It does not have Go Again to play it out, and you can't just fill your decks with these because you like. Anyway, against like Guardians, they're popping something so you don't have an action point at the end. Against like other decks, it doesn't matter if it has Phantasm or not, because they're not going to be popping it. So it's just like more niche case scenarios. It is pretty cool though to play out like Vinny or Necria and guarantee it doesn't get popped against those mid popper decks like Viscerai or Dash.
Mm-hmm.
I did have the thought of you could cut like Toma Findals from certain matchups and like just play Passing Mirage in these Ash. And then like the first power play opportunity, you could just use the boots to play out one of these Ash or a Passing or whatever. Because it's still like a red block for 3 cards. So, you know, we'll see how that goes.
Nice.
I mean, we'll see. It's like, it's pretty rough to play those out and have them matter, you know. And the other thing I'm excited about though is the Crown of Dominion, because it makes you royal, it gives you a gold, and you get access to 3 pretty powerful tools that I'm pretty uncertain how many matchups they will be good in.
Mm-hmm.
But also just like, even if Crown of Dominion is like a, you know, in matchups where you don't need as much armor, or matchups maybe where you go turn 0, like you go first, you can pitch 2 reds to make 2 Ash and draw a card off that gold. Which is like really good. As it stands right now, you don't have like a resource sink to make you Ash in the beginning. So we'll have to play around with that. But just, yeah, like I said, the access to the gold and the access to those cards potentially, like the Warhorn or whatever, you know, may prove like a great sideboard utility card. But
nice.
We'll have to see. That's all I got.
Awesome.
It's the only things.
Yeah, not much for Illusionists in there, other than some cards, like as you said, that are for somebody else, who knows, and then some that are for Prism, but I guess only in Blitz. So in a weird spot there. Hopefully, love to see another Illusionist, but I know some people don't agree with that. But the people watching this video probably agree. So
Dromai is pretty fair too.
Dromai is fair. That was the one thing I realized. You know, with all the dragons, you would think it's not fair, and I'm sure in the matchups where she is the kind of beatdown, it can feel like she's not fair. But for them, compared to like the top decks, like she's pretty fair. Like there's a lot of drawbacks. Like you have to work very hard to get your dragons out, and then as you said, they just don't stay for very long, and that's part of it. You got to get used to that for sure, because you know, you gotta kill your darlings, or let your darlings die, I guess, in this situation. But awesome. Isaac, thank you so much. This was really cool. I'm excited to try out this deck and, you know, talk about it more in between my Arachne testing, because I'm like halfway to becoming an assassin main. But this will be an interesting matchup. I think it might be bad for Arachne, but so we'll see if Dromai kind of rises up with his popularity. But yeah, thank you so much. And if anyone has questions, put them in the comments. We'll have a deck list and Isaac's sideboard guide, and you know, would love to talk about it. And if you like our stuff, please like and subscribe. Think about joining our Patreon for as little as it was $4 a month. Like, you know, join our Discord. Great community there. We can talk more about Dromai and everything else. And yeah, we gotta go, because I gotta hopefully grab my boxes so we can open them in our Discord party. But I don't know if they're at the front door or not. I'll have to go check. We'll see.
All right, thanks, Colin.
Yeah,
it's been great.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time. Goodbye.